Okay, welcome to Psych 236, Developmental Psychology. Today we're talking about middle childhood psychosocial development, and that's chapter 13. So let's get started. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of important stuff. We're going to talk about the self-concept. We're going to talk about families, peers, bullying, and moral development at the end. Okay, so I might have to go a little bit quickly and try not to talk too much to get through all of this in the time we have. Okay, let's talk about the self-concept. So during childhood, the children's developing sense of self helped shape their goals. Okay, remember that self-concept is basically an understanding of self and our competencies. Your self-concept is an idea of who you are, to put it bluntly. Okay, it's an idea of who you are. According to Freud, age 7 to 11, which he called the latency period, during this time, children suppress selfish, impulsive drives and instead redirect that energy toward developing cognitive skills and social concerns. So ages 7 to 11, Freud called latency. So that's when children use their energy basically to try to do well in school, for friendships, for play, those kind of things. Remember that before this, it was the phallic stage when children, according to Freud, realized that they had, sexual urges, sexual attraction toward the opposite sex parent. And then they learned to identify with the same sex parent and then develop their sense of gender, right? And during this period of time, they suppress those sexual urges and instead focus on school activities and play and friendships and things like that. That's what Freud said. Erickson called ages 6 to 11 industry versus inferiority, where children try to master abilities valued by the culture and they see themselves as competent or inferior. So similar to Freud, Erickson said that this is a time when children basically devote themselves to school and friendships and activities. They compare themselves with other children. And some children develop a sense of industry, a sense that they can do things well and feel competent. Other children, feel that they're inferior, they're not doing well at school, that they don't compare well to other kids. That's what Erickson said. Okay, let's keep going and let's talk about more about this stuff. We're going to get to some interesting stuff really soon when it comes to comparing oneself. Okay, so cognitive ability is developing further during middle childhood. These are very important school years. All schools are very important, but this is a time when children really get a sense of whether they're competent or not, from ages about 6 to 11. Okay, children become more objective. In other words, they think more rationally about how they're really doing. Before this, it was more like that they think they're good no matter what. Remember, you as parents, you tell your kids that you're smart, right? You're awesome, that kind of stuff. And children believe you, okay? And they all think they're smart and awesome, right? When they get to about this age, they start realizing that they're not as smart, not as good at things as maybe their parents have been telling them, right? Because they start comparing themselves and they realize that some children are doing better. They may be at the bottom, maybe they're somewhere in the middle, or maybe they are doing well, but they become more objective, right? They know more or less where they stand based on some more real evidence, not just what people tell them. They begin to compare themselves with others, okay? Peers become more important and they compare themselves. Who's the strongest, who's the prettiest, who's smarter, that kind of stuff. They notice all these things, they compare themselves, right? They notice other children, they see how well they're doing, how they compare, and all this affects their self-concept and their self-esteem, okay? They assess their strengths and weaknesses. They realize that they're good at some things, not so good at others, right? We all have strengths and weaknesses, and they start realizing this around this time, right? In middle childhood. They recognize they have both desirable and undesirable qualities, okay? Nobody's perfect. You have things that are good about you and things that are not so good, okay? Your self-esteem, to define that for you, is just a feeling of confidence and satisfaction with oneself. Self-esteem is about how you feel about yourself. Your self-concept is what you think of yourself. Your self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. Because children become more objective, okay? So, self-esteem actually declines during middle childhood because they're more likely to think of themselves in more realistic ways rather than just believe what their parents tell them. During this time, their self-esteem actually drops. They don't feel as good about themselves on average. Before this, they felt quite good about themselves. Parents tell them that they're beautiful, that they're smart, that they can do anything, right? And they believe their parents. By this time, they start realizing that mommy and daddy have kind of just been telling me that because they love me and that I'm not necessarily good at everything. I'm good at some things and not others. Self-esteem actually declines during this time. And a very important study was done by Harder in 1998. Not sure this is in the book, in any of the books, the online one or the physical one. But a very important thing I wanted to share with you guys. Harder in 1998 identified five types of competence that are important for children that basically affect their self-esteem. According to Harder, there's 5 different things that children really care about, that they compare themselves on, that affects their self-esteem. And that is how they're doing, and that is their scholastic competence, so how well they're doing in school, their athletic competence, right? How athletic they are, how likable they are, right? How much their peers like them, you know, that'll be with how popular they are, that kind of stuff. Physical appearance, how good looking they are, okay? And behavioral conduct, how well behaved they are. These 5 things, according to Harder, are what really shapes children's self-esteem during this time. And most children, he found, have what he called a sawtooth profile. And what that means is that they may be high on some things, low on others, in the middle of others, so it's up and down. So it looks like a saw, right, with teeth, up and down, okay? So, you know, they might be low, medium, high, right? They might be low on scholastic, medium on athletic, high on likability, medium on, you know, physical appearance, and maybe high on behavior conduct, something like that. Or some other pattern, but it's up and down. It's rare that you'll have a child that's just great at everything or a child that's just bad at everything. Most of us have strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, every now and then there'll be some kid that basically seems to have it all. And that seems to be unfair, right? They're very good at school, they're very athletic, they're very popular, they're very good looking, and they're well behaved, right? And other kids, you know, don't like these kids very much. Oh, Miss Know-It-All or Miss Perfect or Mr. Perfect. There are kids like that, okay? But most kids up and down, okay? That's the way I was. That's the way most kids are, okay? Scholastic, believe it or not, I wasn't doing that well in grade school. I didn't care that much, okay? I was pretty athletic. I've always been, okay? When I got to high school, I played for my high school basketball team. I was in track and field. I was in tennis. I was very athletic, so I was high on that. So medium scholastic, high athletic. Likability, I was in the middle. Physical appearance, I'd like to think I was a good-looking kid, actually, believe it or not. And behavioral conduct, I wasn't very well behaved. Get out of my seat too much, talk too much, I'd get into trouble. As a matter of fact, there was one time I didn't even get to go to a field trip because of my behavioral conduct. The teacher gave me lots of chances. Okay, you have your name's on the board now, you're misbehaving. Oh, now there's a check by your name, another check. By the time I got to the 3rd check, all right, you're not going to the field trip. I didn't get to go to the Getty Museum. That was the field trip. There were other field trips, and I eventually did go to the Getty, okay, in other classes. But yeah, most children basically have this up and down profile. Children can actually also have similar profiles, but differ in self-esteem. So you might have kids that have very similar profiles, you know, scholastic, athletic, that medium, high, they're the same on these things, but one of them can feel okay about themselves, another one can feel bad. One can have really high self-esteem, the other one low. That can happen too. I usually felt okay about myself during this time. I would say I had probably high self-esteem, not the highest, but I think I was somewhere in the middle to high. The importance of the types matter, right? In some places, they value some more than others, okay? If in your school, or let's say your culture really values physical appearance, but you're low on that, then you will not have high self-esteem. In this culture, we value looks a lot, more than ever nowadays, I think, than before. So the girls that are really pretty, or the boys that are really good looking, they have good self-esteem usually, even though they might not be doing so well on other things, because this culture really values a lot. And then there's other kids who don't look so good, or funny looking, or not on the attractive side, but they might be smart, or, you know, or well behaved, but they may not feel that good about themselves because on what really matters to them, or what really the culture seems to matter, they're not doing so well on, okay? You might be really good at school, but not athletic, not very likable, not very good looking, but well behaved. You probably won't feel very good about yourself. You're just what they call a dork or a nerd, right? You know, we really value looks in this country and athletic ability. We do value intelligence, academic ability, stuff like that, but not as much as those other things, believe it or not. Okay, it's important, but it depends on where you go to school. When I went to school, believe it or not, if you were smart, they called you a nerd, a dork. I think they still do that, right? And they make fun of you for that. And they liked you if you were athletic and good looking. But if you were just good at school, oh, there's something wrong with you. And that, by the way, is really bad. That's dysfunctional, okay? Our schools should not be that way. Kids that are smart and doing well are the ones who should be more popular, the ones who should be more likable. But it's the other way around. It's the good-looking ones and the athletic ones. All right, so a little bit about that. That was interesting when it comes to self-esteem. That was all about the self. Now let's talk about families. Families, of course, are always important, but we're going to talk about family functions now. Family has a lot of important functions, okay? You know, children in school, right, especially for children in school. So there's very important family functions. So families, for instance, provide food, clothing, shelter, right? They encourage children, right? Encourage kids to go to school and learn and motivate them to do well. Encourage children, right, to develop, you know, good self-esteem, right? Families help children feel competent, feel loved and appreciated, right? If you have a good family, you feel loved, you feel appreciated, and you feel competent because they tell you you're smart, they tell you to try harder, right? Those kind of things. Family also provides opportunities for children to nurture those friendships with their peers, okay? Families provide time, space, opportunities, right? And teach children social skills, right? To develop those relationships. Yes, your family should be providing you with time to see your friends, right? To go to the park and be with other kids, the space, the opportunity, the time, and also tell you basically and teach you how to relate well to others, how to talk to others, how to behave yourself and not to do certain things. Families do all those things. And families provide harmony and stability, usually, right? That's what you want. Families provide safety, security, predictable routines. Not all families meet these needs as well as others, and we're going to talk about that now. And this gets interesting. The type of family that you want, okay, and research confirms this, you want what's called a nuclear family. And that means that you have a mom, a dad, right, siblings, right, you know, one kid or two kids, right, that kind of stuff. Mommy and daddy are married, okay, it's not a stepdad, not a stepmom, right, and the kids are, you know, they're siblings, they're biologically related, you know, 50% or 100% if they're identical. That's called a nuclear family. That's considered, that is what's supposed to provide the best outcomes for children, right? One mother, one father, and then a child, okay? And like I said, by mother and father, I'm talking about that, you know, they're married, they love each other, right? And, you know, they're not divorced, it's not a step parent, right? Not that kind of stuff, okay? It's their own children, right? Parents in nuclear family tend to be wealthier. They tend to have better jobs. They tend to be better educated, mentally and physically healthier, okay? They're more likely to compromise with their children, talk to them about why they have certain rules, adjust the rules, right? They're less hostile, not as mean, right? More likely to stay married. They argue less over money because they have better jobs and they have more money, right? So they argue less over money. You argue a lot about money, by the way, when you don't have it, okay? Or when it's tight. So they argue less over money. So that means there's more harmony, more stability for the kids, right? There's a happier time at home, not as much fighting, more stability. They're less likely to move around from place to place, less likely to get evicted or get thrown out from their home because they couldn't make the payments. Okay, that's how their parents are. Children are more likely to finish school, okay? More likely to obey the law, more likely to have happy marriages themselves because they learn about what a happy marriage is like, more likely to pursue fulfilling careers, right? Because they believe in themselves, the parents encourage them, right, to follow their dreams, right? They tend to attend better schools. The family's wealthier, they live in a better neighborhood, so they attend better schools, okay, richer neighborhoods, right? Live in bigger houses. They have better food, better clothes, better shelter, better healthcare, okay? And things are better, okay? That's a nuclear family, right? It's like basically mom and dad team up, right? And both bring income, you know, to the table, so to speak, and do a good job providing harmony and stability for their kids and good opportunities for their children. And that have a lot to do with where you live, by the way. Those are nuclear families. Now, it's possible that the mother might not work. There's a lot of women in this country who don't work, about a third or so don't work. Most men do, right? But sometimes that means that the man makes enough money, the husband makes enough money for both of them, for the whole family, and they're still okay. Sometimes it may be, very rarely the mother works and the husband doesn't. But a nuclear family means they're both there and they both contribute one way or another, and it's a better outcome for children. There's other outcomes that are not as good, but can still work. You also have adoptive families, right? Where they have a stepdad, right? Or a stepmom, or you have a family that where a kid has been adopted, okay? And that's kind of similar to having a stepdad or stepmom, right? And you also have same-sex parent families. They usually function well, okay? They do, okay? And sometimes better than nuclear families. They do function well. But they can vary tremendously in the ability to meet the child's needs, right? They do vary. It depends on the needs of the child. They usually function well, okay? So they do, sometimes as good as families, as other families, okay? Wait. Okay, adoptive and same-sex families, that's what we're talking about here, okay? They usually function well, okay? Your kid has been adopted, right? Or you have same-sex parent families, they usually are doing a good job, right? They function well. Step families, that's a different category, okay? Not the same as adoptive, but similar. But step families are basically when you have stepchildren or you have a stepdad. That basically means that you probably had a kid with one person, that relationship didn't work out, so you married somebody else instead. And now you have a stepfather or a stepmother, right? You may have been divorced, or maybe you were not. Maybe you never got married, but you had a kid with somebody else. And now you're married to somebody else, or you're with somebody else. Those are step families. Some of them function well, okay? And have positive relationships. You're more likely to have positive relationships in these kind of families when the children are under 2 years of age. When the children are young, it's easier for these families to get along better, because it's more likely that the children are going to accept the step parent, okay, because they're younger, right? More likely to view them as their real parent. They may not even know, by the way. But step families are more difficult with teenagers. When you have teenagers and you have a step family, that is where you're more likely to have problems, where the teenage son, basically, or the teenage child, son or daughter, are basically, when you have conflict, they're going to say something like, "You're not my real dad. I don't have to listen to you. I don't care what you think. You're not my real mom. The hell with you." You're more likely to have those kind of problems, and you're not likely to have a very tight-knit family. You're more likely to have that with teenagers. And even when you have children under 2 and it works out really well, when they grow up to become teenagers, and especially when they realize, or you tell them, or they know you're not the real parent, they're more likely to give you problems when they're teenagers, because identity is very important. And real mommy or daddy isn't there, one of them isn't there, and they are going to give you trouble for that. They're not going to trust you as much. Teenage years are difficult, okay? So a solid parental alliance is more difficult to form also when you have step families, right? Because one child is one parent is the biological parent and the other one is not. So the child will usually be more closely aligned with the biological parent and not the other. And because of that, it'll be harder to have a tight-knit family, okay? And the child's going to challenge one parent more than the other. Child will be more loyal to one parent than the other, right? Child loyalty to parents, right, can be undermined by disputes, right? You have a problem with the child, and one parent basically tries to punish the child, and then the other parent, that's the biological parent, says, "No, you don't have to do that. Don't listen to him or don't listen to her," right? That's very bad. You have to have a solid alliance and agree with each other on these things, or you're going to have problems. But you're more likely to have problems with step families. And there's also other kinds of families. There's also grandparent families, also called a skip generation family, okay? Where basically it means that the biological parents aren't around. It could be that they passed away, or it could be that they're incarcerated, or it could be that they can't take care of you, so they gave you up to grandparents to take care of you. Maybe they're too young, or they're not capable of taking care of you, but basically it means you were raised by your grandparents. These kind of families usually provide lower income. Okay, grandparents are usually, retired and they're on a fixed income. And when they grew up, things were cheaper. They're older now, they may no longer be working, and money is more tight than it would be if they were, if they were younger and had a real, another kind of job, they weren't retired, right? They're more likely to have health problems, of course, because they're older and they provide less stability. Less stability because of health problems. They might have to be, hospitalized, they may die, that kind of stuff. They don't provide as much stability. Or one grandparent dies before the other, it's less stability, okay? They often involve grandchildren with health or behavioral problems who are less likely to succeed in school. Often, grandparents are raising children who have problems, because, they have problems with their previous parents who didn't do a good job, let's say. And that has affected the children. And now they have behavioral problems or health problems, other problems. And now their grandparents have to try to do a good job with these kids, right? And try to step in and help them. But the fact that their parents are not there usually means that the parents are not around and the children are going to suffer, right? Or it could mean there was an abusive home and they were taken away, all kinds of things. And usually it means they're more likely to be health and behavioral problems. Not always, but more likely. They receive fewer services for children with special needs. If the child is special needs, they're less likely to receive services. Why? Because often the grandparents are not aware of these things. When they grew up, they didn't have those things. Now there's more services, and people who are younger, parents who are younger are more likely to know about them than the older people. And often grandparents are tired and they don't want to always take you to those things. My son's on the autism spectrum. He gets speech therapy, something called occupational therapy, if I'm remembering correctly what it's called. He has, special ed, there's all these things, right? And it's hard, to say the truth. Take them here and there and everywhere. Take time out of your day to do all that stuff. It's hard, okay? Now, of course, we're doing remote learning. Everything has to happen from home, and the services are not as good. Speech therapy doesn't work as well through a screen or the other therapies. It's like we even gave up on one of them. It was useless, pointless to try to do, some kind of therapies through Zoom. They just don't work, especially when the kid's autistic and doesn't really pay attention that much. So it's harder. And sometimes older parents aren't able to put up with these things, don't know about them. So they're less likely to receive services. You also have blended families. With blended families, you're usually talking about families where there's many adults. There could be parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. So you have a bunch of people living together in the home, and there's also children. It could also be that, you're living with your boyfriend or something like that, and your mom and dad live there too, and your children, things like that. That's a blended family. Many generations, right? People of different age. Some of them related, some of them not, or maybe they're all related. Children in these families usually do quite well. However, the outcomes is not as good as a nuclear family, but it is better than single parent families, which we'll talk about, okay? There's more disagreements about child rearing. The parents don't always agree with the grandparents, and the grandparents often want to step in and give their opinion, and often it's not welcomed, or don't tell me what to do with my kids, or that kind of stuff, right? And that produces more stress for children. There are a lot of disagreements, okay? Especially when you have different generations that grew up at different times and believe in different things. Children are exposed to stress and conflict. Children who are exposed to stress and conflict do worse in school, okay? If they're stressed out and they're anxious, right? They have problems at home, they're more likely to have problems at school. They're not, they're more likely to not do as well. In general, that's just the way it is, right? Your mind is occupied, you're stressed out, you're anxious, you can't focus as well, you can't do as well. The motivation may not be there also if you're having other problems. This sounds kind of mean, but the worst outcomes for kids, one-parent families, single-parent families, okay? That means it's only one parent, usually a single mother. There are single fathers too, but single mothers are much more common. What it usually means is that, you were with someone, you had children, and then it didn't work out. You got divorced, or maybe you weren't even married, but, didn't work out, and the dad said, you know what, screw this, I'm out of here, and they leave you alone to raise the kids. If you have one, right, two, the more you have, the harder it is. One-parent families provide the worst outcomes for children. Doesn't mean you can't do a good job, but it's harder, okay? It's a lot harder to raise a child by yourself, okay? Usually involves single, unmarried mothers, okay? And they provide less stable environments, okay? Less stable environments because, they tend to be young and poor and change jobs often. Less stability, right? young and, they may not have a job, or if they do have a job, it's not usually not a very good job. It's hard to have a very good job, a demanding job, by the way, and also raise children. Often, having children early will make it so basically you can't go to college, or it'll be harder for you to go to college and then get your degree and then get a good job. But so they tend to be poor and have worse jobs, right? They change jobs often because those jobs aren't that good. So they may quit one job and try another one, and not very good income, usually not very good benefits, if any, okay, as far as health benefits, things like that. And also repeated romances. Remember, you're still young for the most part, with these one-parent families and single mothers, right? So yeah, they'll hook up with someone, and by hooking up, I don't mean just sex, but I mean they'll meet someone, try a relationship with this person, doesn't work out, and maybe with that one, and and the child may meet some of these people, right? And then these people may not be around later on. It might not work out. You say, oh, and you might tell son, oh yeah, this is so-and-so, he's going to be your new daddy from now on. And then later on, it doesn't work out, and say, well, what happened to him? Well, that didn't work out, right? No, mommy's with this guy now, right? Or this is your daddy now, or whatever it is. I'm making light of this, but stuff like that does happen. I have, there's a lot of people like that. I have several cousins, female cousins, who are in that situation, single parents. Actually, I'm older now, so their kids are older and mostly grown up now, but they went through all of that. And here's another thing: when you're young, right, and you have, and you're a single parent, it's harder for people to commit to you. It's harder for you to find a stable relationship and find someone who's going to be willing to marry you, because they have to accept not just you, but also your child that is not their child. And most other people, these men out there who want to date you, and if they're willing to marry you, they usually want someone who doesn't have kids that they're going to have their own kids with. That is the reality. Okay, and sure, they'll date you and use you, but they don't always stick around. It's harder to find a good man who's willing to commit to you and your kids. Okay, that's the reality of being a single parent. Okay, obviously, the better looking you are, the more likely you are to find someone who's going to want to stick around with you. But it is harder. Okay, the younger you are, obviously, that makes it easier. If you're older, that's even harder. Not as good looking, even harder. Okay. So there's many changes. Cohabitation, you may live with somebody, then with somebody else. Maybe you try living with your parents, didn't work out, then you find a boyfriend or someone to help you out, and you live with him and then with somebody else, and you may go through marriage, divorce, remarriage, right? Less stability, more changes, more stress, more frustration transmitted to children, right? More frustration, you get upset, you get mad, okay? Things don't work out, you're having problems in your relationship, problems at work, you're poor, it's hard to make ends meet. I know about this also because, by the way, yeah, my mother was a single mother. She raised 5 kids by herself. She married my dad. They had lots of kids, and my dad would beat her, so my mom left them. And then she had to raise 5 kids on her own. And she was mad all the time and frustrated and poor. And she beat the crap out of us lots of times. That's what happens when you're frustrated. You take it out on your kids. Right? Children are more likely to rebel if attention is directed to a new adult, a new stepchild, right? You find somebody else that you're in a relationship with, right? Romantic relationship, and now you're giving him attention, right? And the kids may not like it. Or you have children with somebody else, or the other person has children, and you give them attention. They don't like that either, okay? Stepchildren less likely to get along than biological children, okay? Children are more likely to quit school, more likely to leave home, become delinquent, more likely to be single mothers themselves later on. Single fathers are less common, okay? It's usually the mother who gets the children when the relationship breaks up. And the sad thing is most dads, it's like it doesn't work out. Most dads is like, yeah, see you later, right? They may come around every now and then. Eventually, most of them stop coming around. Eventually, they make their own lives somewhere else, and then those kids don't see their dad very much. It's a very difficult thing for children, okay? Let's keep going talking about this thing. Like I said, there's a lot of important stuff here. I hope I get through it all. I tend to talk too much sometimes because it reminds me of my own experiences, right? Family challenges. There's 2 factors that increase the likelihood of dysfunction, right? The likelihood of problems in every structure, every ethnic group, and every nation. There's 2 things that will increase problems and dysfunction, basically make it more likely that you're going to have a dysfunctional family, okay? And one of them are low income or poverty. That's the same thing, basically. If you don't have enough money, if you're poor, things are just harder, okay? It's hard to make ends meet. You're more frustrated. The stress is transmitted to children, etc., right? So usually children from poor families have more symptoms of mental disturbance. They're more likely to be abused. They're more likely, to be neglected. They're more likely, to just have frustration transmitted to them, more likely to develop problems of their own. A lot of stress, a lot of chaos in that family. I know because I grew up in one of those families, okay? Children in single mother households do better if the father pays child support, by the way, or if the nation subsidizes single parents. Often, yeah, we have the father disappear, and you have a right, by the way, as the single mother or as the single parent, to receive help from that other person. And usually that means the father has to pay child support. And it's usually a good chunk of their income, by the way. The more money they make, the more money they need to pay for child support. And if they do that, the children are much better off. If they don't pay child support, then you're more likely to be poor and more likely to have more difficulty raising those children. So it's important that they do that. Not all states do a good job of going after deadbeat dads, they call them, parents, right, who don't pay child support. But there are some countries, not the US, where if you are a single parent, you'll get help from the government, right? You'll get additional income or whatever it is to help you raise those kids, okay? I know I've seen that situation too, because I also have cousins who have, their relationship haven't worked out, and they're the ones on their own, not with their kids. And one of them, got pulled over at a stop once for, I think doing running a stop sign or something like that, because where you don't make a full stop. Cop pulled them over, they looked them up, owed a ton of child support, thousands of dollars. They arrested his ass and threw him in jail, right? That's what happens here in California. They care a lot about that stuff. Other states, not so much, but it's important that the father pays child support, right? Now he's all bummed out. He's working. A lot of his money is going, for child support. And yeah, he's poor, basically. That's what happens, right? And you have to split your income. Another factor that's likely to increase chances of having a dysfunctional family it's also high conflict. A lot of problems, a lot of arguments, a lot of a lot of fights, and they don't have to be physical. They could be verbal, that causes a lot of problem. In my own family now, there is high conflict. My wife, me don't always get along, and she's very stressed out, especially now because of working from home and stuff, and taking care of the children at the same time, by the way, right? Children are going to school via Zoom. We're doing our classes via Zoom. We both teach. And we have one kid that's special needs. He won't do shit on his own. He won't do anything. We have to help him. So it's like we're doing the job of the teacher, and we're also being parents, doing our own jobs. And it's really hard. That will cause conflict, a lot of anxiety, stress, and then you're more likely to fight. Okay, that's what happens. Let's talk more about family income. And I have to move faster. I'm going too slow, okay? Family income. So family income relates to a lot of things. It correlates with function and structure. All 5 functions that we talk about that families provide all benefit from family income. Okay? The family stress model says that any risk factor, such as low income, right, or it could be divorce, unemployment, all that will increase stress on the family. That's what the family stress model says. And one of those stressors, of course, can be low income. In developed nations, poverty does not directly increase stress. So here in the US, poverty doesn't directly increase stress, right? It is more difficult, but it doesn't directly increase stress. It increases stress because, for other reasons, okay? Even if you're poor in this country, children usually have adequate food and clothing. In this country, you're not going to starve to death. Your children are still going to have clothes and things like that, okay? But poverty does increase stress indirectly. What it does is it makes adults, parents, more harsh, more hostile. They're frustrated, right? They're stressed out, and they take it out on their kids. That's what poverty does in this country. In other countries, it's even worse. Parents are only frustrated and stressed out, but they can't even provide enough food and clothing for their kids, or even shelter. In this place, the U.S. mostly indirectly through poverty increases stress by making parents just more mean and hostile. Parents that are angry or depressed are not as loving, not as firm, not as caring, okay? Yeah, if you're stressed out, you're more likely to yell at the kids, more likely to beat them, more likely to cuss them out, more likely to do all those things. Doesn't mean you will, but it's more likely, and some parents will. Conflict, speaking of conflict, here's the thing. Children do suffer if family members fight, especially if it's physical, right? If it's physical abuse and even if it's verbal abuse. Okay, so they do suffer from these things if they witness these things, right? Parents yelling at each other, cussing each other out, right? Even worse if there's physical abuse where, you know, dad is beating up mom. There are cases where mom beats up dad, by the way. And not because dad can't stand up for himself or that, it's not because dad is not as weak or something like that, but usually because he doesn't want to hit the woman because he knows he'll get his ass thrown in jail. So she takes advantage of that and often beats him. I know of situations like that, right? Where, you know, it's worse, by the way, if you're a man and you beat the woman than if she beats you. Both of them are illegal, but if there's a fight and there's physical abuse and you get into a physical fight, chances are the cops are going to haul away the man and not the woman. Okay. Children also benefit, but so when there's conflict, yes, it's harmful if family members fight, especially if there's physical or verbal abuse. Should you break up? Should you separate? Children do benefit from separation if parents are openly hostile to one another. If they're fighting, cussing each other out in front of the kids, beating each other up in front of the kids. If you can kind of hide it or do it when the kids aren't there, you know, when the kids are asleep, hopefully you don't wake them up, okay, then it's not as bad. But if you do it openly, you've already given up on trying to hide it, then separation, you know, would benefit the kids. They won't witness that as much. It doesn't mean that you should do that or that you want to do that, by the way. Children don't benefit from divorce if parents divorce because they're dissatisfied with each other or distant with each other, right? You know, where they got divorced and it's because she doesn't give him enough attention anymore, or he doesn't really show his love anymore, or basically he doesn't like the way she looks anymore and wants somebody younger. That doesn't benefit kids. In other words, they basically get divorced because they just want somebody else. You know, they want some more love. They want somebody else who's younger or somebody who's better looking. Children don't benefit from that, okay? But if you're fighting all the time in front of the kids and all that stuff, then the children are better off if you're separated. But it doesn't mean you should be separated, by the way, okay? If that's a decision you have to make. You know, maybe it's worth it to stay together, maybe it's not. It depends on your unique situation. All family transitions, you know, all family changes affect children, okay? Changing jobs affects children, changing homes, changing romantic partners, getting divorced, getting remarried, all those things. Children are more likely to quit school, be delinquent, have early love affairs, all kinds of things. Let's keep going because there's a lot of important stuff here. There are some children who do very well despite all these risk factors, despite all these problems, okay? And those children are said to have resilience. You know, right? These children are resilient. In other words, they have a lot of difficulty, a lot of problems, and despite that, they still do well. They still succeed. And I'm one of those, by the way. I'm one of these resilient children, okay? Or, you know, person who was resilient. I had all the freaking problems, all of them. Single parent, right? Physical abuse, right? Emotional abuse, growing up poor, drugs in my neighborhood, everything. And I'm still here, right? I went to college, I made it, now I have a decent job and raising a family of my own, even though I myself have problems, right? Because I chose someone who, you know, argues with me a lot, but I'm not the nicest guy either. I mean, I am nice, but let's just say I'm not blameless either. But I am resilient. And there are those children who are resilient, right? Who, despite all these difficulties, will still do well. Resilient children have the capacity to adapt well to changes, to adversity. Despite difficulty, they can still do well. They can overcome even serious stress. Resilient children will still make friends, right? Develop their own friends, even though they have difficulties at home. Find activities to do, right? Develop their own skills, despite the fact they may not get a lot of support at home, right? I mean, I did that. I still do well in school. Even though my mom called me an idiot, my mom didn't expect much from me. She did it. I didn't really show much promise when I was in grade school. I didn't do my homework. You know, I wasn't doing well. It wasn't until later that I found out I was actually smart. But yeah, you call the dumbass, pendejo, cabrón, all these things, right? And they treat you like crap, you know? They don't just call you names, they also treat you like crap, okay? These children have better emotional and academic function. They're able to regulate their emotions, still able to do well in school despite these problems. This is more likely to be the case, children are more likely to be resilient if they have an easy temperament. In other words, they're good kids and they will still be good even if there's difficulties. Or they have a high IQ, right? All that is helpful, but it's not essential. Okay, all that helps, but it's not as essential. There can be other reasons. Okay, I think I had an easy temperament. I think I'm a good kid. Right? I think I was a good kid. I was the one who actually followed the rules and obeyed. Right, and I'm also high IQ. I was in the gifted program. Obviously, I went to college. I have a PhD. All that helped me a lot. By the way, being smart is a very important thing. It is helpful. It's not essential. If you're not so smart, you can still do well despite these problems. But having a high IQ is a very helpful thing. Being smart, okay? Because, well, you're better able to just find a path forward and find something that you're good at and succeed, okay? Early social support and religious faith also helps you. Also helps foster resilience, right? And good parenting also helps. If you have good parents, but you still grow up poor in a bad neighborhood, if you have good parents, that will also make children more resilient. Or if you have a religious faith, right, you will go to church and all those things, that's also more likely to make you resilient. You have social support, you have people who love you and encourage you, right? Even though you're poor, growing up in a bad neighborhood, right? But it's especially bad when it's your own parents who are causing the problems, who are basically beating you and, and mistreating you, right? In that case, that's not good parenting. But if you do have good parents, you're more likely to be resilient. Religious faith is particularly important for African-American children, right? That they have religious faith, that they have a good church community. Why? Because of all the discrimination and racism, right? The world treats you like crap. And you need a community in which you're accepted, in which you're treated better. And that helps you feel better and become more resilient. There's many reasons why. That's just a few hints, but it's a very important thing if you have that religious faith, especially if you're African-American. Let's keep going, because I always talk too much. Let's talk about peers. This is a time when peers become very important to children, okay? Friendships matter even more during this time. And they're going to matter even more in adolescence, but your peer group is very important. Your peer group are children who are roughly the same age, okay, same social status, and you usually tend to hang around with kids that are like you, right? If you're middle class, you hang around other middle class children, right? Usually don't have a case where some rich kid is hanging out with some poor kid, okay? They don't live in the same neighborhood, okay? But they work, play, and they learn together. They go to the same school often, they're in the same class, right? Those are your peers. Those are the people you see and you compare yourself with. Difficulties with peers, right, leads to children being more at risk for developing other problems later. Other problems like depression and resentment and loneliness and anger and aggression and things like that if they don't get along with their peers. In middle childhood, children care more about their opinions of classmates. They're less egocentric. They care more about what other people think. Okay? Peers provide companionship, right? Validation. They make you feel accepted. They make you feel like you're okay. They give you advice. You learn to negotiate with your peers. You trade things, whether it's actual things or favors or whatever it is, you learn to negotiate. You learn to talk to people. You learn to share, to compromise, to defend yourself, because you also, also treat each other bad once in a while, right? Peers also teach lessons adults cannot teach. You as a parent can't teach them all the lessons. Adults are not equal. You don't know what it's like to be them. Sure, you were a kid once, but things have changed. And peers can tell you more about what it's really like and how you're really doing. Parents are going to tell you, oh yeah, you're good looking, you're smart, you're popular, right? Yeah, you're awesome. Your peers, right? Those are roughly your age. They're going to give it to you straight. They'll tell you what you're really like. Your parents, if they're good parents, are just going to think you're wonderful, and they kind of have a blind spot. May not understand that you're really not as smart as they think you are, or as good looking, or as likable. Your peers will give it to you straight. You're more likely to learn about yourself from them. Peers are crucial for social growth and adjustment, right? Having those peers, those friendships. Peers don't have to be friends, but there's other people like you who you may hang around with, you may see, as long as you relate well to them. They may not be necessarily close friends or real friends, but just people you see and interact with. It's good to have those peers that make you feel better about yourself, and you're more likely to do better. Friendships are even more important. Friendships. Personal friendships are more important to children than peers. Personal friendships, we're talking about basically, and then this is not a good picture here. Those are probably twins or something, not friends. But personal friendships are more important. Here you're talking about those that you can really confide in, those that you spend more time with, that you share more personal information with, you play with more, they're more your friends, okay? And it's not just anybody who will be your friend at this time. It's to be someone who has a lot of things in common with you. There was a study that was done that showed that children from violent and non-violent homes have equal numbers of acquaintances. They have equal numbers of peers, right? Children in violent and non-violent homes, but children from violent homes are less likely to have a close friend. See, they're less likely to have a real friend. And that is sad, right? Because when you're growing up in a violent home, you've been mistreated and abused, and that affects you emotionally, psychologically. It's harder to connect with others. It's harder to trust, right? It affects you. You also learn skills from friendship, skills relating to acquiring close relationships. You learn about, how to talk to people, how to get along with others, right? How to avoid loneliness, how to avoid isolation and rejection, right? You learn a whole bunch of things from peers. Both peer acceptance and close friends protect against loneliness and depression. Let's talk more about these friendships. Friendships become more intense and closer in middle childhood, like I said, right? Children want more friends during this time, right? They get more upset if friendship ends. So it's not as good if you like move far away and then they don't get to see their friends anymore. They're more upset by that. Earlier on, you were able to make such moves. They didn't get too upset. Okay. Now friendships are more meaningful, more real, and they get very upset if they can't see their friends or they end because you move far away or something like that. They find it harder to make new friends now because it's more about having things in common. It's more about other things. It's not just that everybody in your class is going to be your friend like it was when you were, 2 years old. Okay. Older children are pickier about friends. Best friends are usually those that are similar, have similar interests, come from similar backgrounds, have similar values. It could be religious values or other values, right? Similar in sex, males, usually their best friend is another male. Females, another female, right? Similar in age, similar in ethnicity. And SES, social economic status, means basically income level. For poor children, their best friend would be somebody else who's poor, And someone who's rich, some best friend usually be somebody else who's rich or comes from a rich background. And that's the way it is, right? By age 10, most children have at least one best friend. Sometimes they say they have, 2 or 3 or something like that. And as they age, they have fewer close friends. As they get older, they have less friends, but they're closer. And I remember during this time, I grew up in a different situation. When I was around this age, I considered my best friend, by the way, to be my cousin. I had a cousin I got along with. I considered him my best friend. We were very close. Other studies show that 36% of kids are popular, 47% of them are average, and 17% of them are rejected. Rejected children, okay? Unpopular children, so the children that are not popular are can be the rejected children. Unpopular children are children who are left out most of the time. They're not picked to be friends, or they're not picked for the team or for the game or whatever it is. They're left out. Their children are not as popular. They're unpopular, okay? And there's different kinds. There are children who are unpopular because they are neglected. They're not really rejected, but they're not picked as a friend, not picked for the team or something like that. They're not really avoided by classmates. It's just that people don't really notice them. Maybe they're quiet and shy and people don't notice them as much and they don't get picked, okay? It's not the ideal situation for those children, but usually doesn't cause any long-term harm, okay? Now, the other ones are worse, right? When you have an aggressive, rejected kid, right? Where the kid is rejected because they're aggressive, they're antagonistic, they're confrontational, they pick fights, they don't get along with others, and that's why they are rejected. They're not picked as being a friend or picked for being on the team or something like that, or when you're making teams, they're left out, especially if you have an odd number. You have, maybe 11 or something like that. When you're going to play basketball, one kid's left out, it's going to be that kid, okay? They have problems regulating their emotions, controlling their anger, right? Controlling their frustration. They're more likely to lash out. They tend to experience maltreatment at home. They have problems at home. They're being usually verbally, physically abused. They have problems at home. There's also withdrawn, rejected kids. Children who are disliked because they're timid, they're anxious, right? They're very fearful, okay? So they also have problems regulating their emotions. They're fearful and they're not as likely to speak up, right? And they tend to also experience maltreatment at home. And that may be why they are shy and anxious, because things are not good at home. These are the kids that withdraw. The aggressive kids are the kids that act out. The neglected children are just the children who are not noticed, okay? Sometimes, yeah, they're loners and things like that, but usually it's just that they're left out. Now let's talk about bullying, okay? We mentioned bullying once already, and now we're going to talk about it in more detail. What is bullying? With bullying, we're talking about a repeated effort to inflict harm through physical attack, verbal attack, social attack. Nowadays, we have something called cyberbullying as well, where you do it online, okay? It has to be repeated, okay? So picking on one kid once doesn't make you a bully. I even did that several times, right? Several times. I even did that, you know, a couple of times with different kids, but it has to be that you do it over and over again. That makes you a bully, okay? You keep picking on certain kids or a certain kid again and again, right? Maybe physically or verbally by calling their names or, you know, or accusing them of stuff or spreading rumors. A social attack would be more like spreading rumors, okay? Bullies are neither victims of bullies or rejected. So it's not what some people believe, that bullies are also being bullied themselves. That's not really true, okay? And they're not really rejected, by the way. Bullies, some of them are popular. They have people who actually admire them. They have a few admiring friends. They have people who like them. And these are called like their henchmen. These are like their friends who kind of like do stuff with them or for them. You know, they're kind of like, because the bully by themselves, by him or herself, isn't really very effective. If they have people who do what they say, it's like they have like their own little gang going, their own little group who will do what the bully says, then they're more effective. Then they can do more harm and beat up more kids. Okay, so they have these people, you know, like they're henchmen. It's like you're in, it's basically like in the animations where you're a villain and your henchmen are the people who work for you, who do your evil deeds, okay? Bullies are also socially perceptive. They're very good at reading people. They can be aggressive, you know, and pick on other kids without being noticed, without getting into trouble with other peers, without getting in trouble with parents and teachers. They're good at hiding stuff. They're good at knowing when they can do what they do or when they shouldn't. And they also lack empathy, by the way. They don't really feel bad for their victims. And bullying is something really bad. You have to stop it. If you don't stop it, it's likely to get worse. And they're likely to become criminals in the future, okay? There's different kinds of bullies, okay? And bullying tends to happen in different forms, depending on whether you're male or female. Male bullies use more direct physical aggression. Male bullies are more likely to hit you, to punch you, to kick you, that kind of stuff, right? More likely to use physical aggression. And it's direct, it's to your face. They do it to you, right? Male bullies tend to be about above average in size. They tend to be bigger and stronger. The victims are smaller and weaker. So to some extent, they're cowards. They pick on children who are weaker and younger. Okay, that's what male bullies do. They realize they have an advantage and they use that. Okay, sometimes it's some overgrown kid in the same grade. They're the same age, but this kid is a lot bigger and stronger, a lot more developed. And there are people like that. And they tend to beat up other kids if they're bullies. Female bullies are different. They're not necessarily bigger or stronger. Female bullies use what is called direct relational aggression, where they'll tease you, they'll call you names, right? They'll taunt you, make fun of you, right? They'll do stuff like that, like in the picture there, right? Actually, that's indirect relational aggression. They also do what's called indirect relational aggression, where they'll spread rumors about you and say that you're easy, you know, or that you're, you know, a whore or a slut, to use those terms, right? They're not acceptable, but that's some of the names they use, right? They'll shun you, basically exclude you, avoid you, right? Or like those girls over there who are talking bad about this other girl over here, and probably will spread rumors, you know, that she has herpes or something like that, right? That's what female bullies do. They're more likely to do things that are verbal and relational. They're usually, female bullies are usually more assertive, right? They stand up more for themselves. The victims usually tend to be more shy and more quiet. So they pick on people like that. And my wife was one of those shy and quiet people that got picked on by these female bullies. And I got picked on by the male bullies, by the way. But I was never beat up. They kind of provoked me. They tried to intimidate me, picked on me. I didn't give in. I said, go ahead, go bring it. See what happens, right? And I was often at the principal's office, you know, and, you know, because of the bullies and stuff like that. They always denied it. They were bullying me, but I stood up for myself. They never actually beat me up, this one bully. He beat up other kids. And eventually, by the way, the bully became my friend because I found out later on, or he found out, that I lived in the same neighborhood. And after that, he found out, hey, we're neighbors, right? And after that, he was my friend. But he did try to pick on me at the beginning because he was bigger and stronger, but never really beat me up because I'd stand up for myself and they would back down, but they kept doing it for a while and eventually that ended. Bullying's effect on victims. Bullies, yeah, do hurt their victims, not just physically, but they can also hurt the victim psychologically. The victim's more likely to have anxiety, right? Be depressed, more likely to suffer from underachievement at school, right? Because it affects their willingness to do well in school and their motivation, right? I remember that one year I was being bullied. I didn't do very well in school because I told the teacher, I told the principal, they didn't believe me, and they didn't do anything about it. So I basically said, you know what, screw you then. I'm not gonna do well in my classes. I destroyed my books. I didn't do well. I didn't care. It was affecting me psychologically, right? But like I said, eventually that ended, right? And I went to another class, another year, and things were different. But before that, the bully became my friend and things kind of stopped, right? Victims also tend to have lower self-esteem, tend to be lonely, right? It's, when a bully picks on you, right? Some big dude, right? Especially some big dude, right? You'd be surprised, that your friends are not really going to stick up for you, right? Because they're afraid. They don't want to get their butts kicked as well. People will scatter and will let that bully beat you up, right? Signs of being a victim of bullying: bad dreams. You tend to have bad dreams because you're afraid and stuff like that, and that feeds into your nightmares, right? No real friends. Like I said, your friends can desert you and not stick up for you. Damaged clothes, torn books, right? If you're getting beat up, unexplained bruises, those are all signs. And parents tend to ignore this stuff, and and a lot of adults as well. They're in denial about it. So but things are changing. It's being studied more, and now we're trying to put a stop to it. But bullying now is happening more online than in person. Okay, but it still happens in every way. Okay, how do you prevent bullying? It's best if the school take a whole school approach, meaning that everybody's involved, students are involved, where they try to mediate peer conflict. Like when two kids have a problem, right? There's another kid that steps in and say, okay, what's the problem here? How can we resolve it? What's going on, right? Something like that. That's called mediation. Befriending, other kids who are isolated, so the bullies don't pick on them that much. Teachers, right, need to encourage cooperative learning in groups, so the bullies, can become friends with those other children rather than picking on them, right? So you're cooperative rather than just on your own. No name calling, insults, right? Adult supervision in the lunchroom, classroom. Don't just let the kids there by themselves without supervision. They're going to do some bad stuff if you don't watch them. Okay, therapy with the bully and his or her family. That can also happen. Removal of the bully from the class, from the school, right? All that can help, but you'd be surprised how often they don't do anything. It's a big problem. All right, that's it for bullying. Now let's talk about moral development. This is something that used to be a part of a different chapter. It used to be in the cognitive development chapter, right, in the previous one, but it got moved because in the textbook, it's now in this chapter. So I had to move it too. In the previous edition, it was somewhere else. Okay, so let's talk about moral development now. This seems that has to do with cognitive development, but it's also psychological. Moral development is the process by which children, it says, adopt principles that lead them to evaluate given behaviors as right and others as wrong, and to govern their own actions in terms of these principles. Moral development is basically about right and wrong, okay? How you learn about right and wrong, how you exercise right and wrong, what you consider right, what you consider wrong. That is moral development. Morality is about right and wrong. How do children think about right and wrong? How do they learn what is right and wrong? How do they behave in moral situations? All this concerns moral development. And when it comes to moral development, because we don't have a ton of time, I'm only going to tell you about one theory of moral development, and that is Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. He has, I think, the most interesting one and the most useful one. There's also Piaget's theory of moral development and others. We'll only talk about Lawrence Kohlberg's theory. And if you were in my one-on-one class, you've heard this before, okay? Lawrence Kohlberg also has a stage theory, but his theory is about moral development. Lawrence Kohlberg used something called a moral dilemma to determine the level of morality that you're at, okay? A moral dilemma is a conflict situation where choices have to be justified. A moral dilemma is basically a problem where no matter what you choose, there's going to be issues. There is no perfect solution. So whatever you choose, you kind of have to justify it or talk about why that was the better choice and not the other one, because there's no perfect solution. And he used several dilemmas. One is called the Heinz dilemma. There's also the prisoner's dilemma, the brother's dilemma. I'll just tell you about the Heinz dilemma. And here's a shortened version of it, just to give you the gist of it. So Heinz was this guy, that was his last name, just like the ketchup bottle, right? He was this guy, and he had a wife that was dying. She was near death. There was a druggist, or pharmacist, you can call him, right, that had a drug that could save her. The drug cost $200 to make, but the druggist, the pharmacist, wanted $2,000 for it. You know, nowadays they're kind of gouging you for, you know, for drugs and stuff like that, for the price of drugs, raising the price even more, right? So it cost $2,000. Heinz could not afford it. He couldn't get $2,000. He couldn't borrow enough from friends. He only borrow $1,000. But the druggist or the pharmacist would not take $1,000, the full amount or nothing, okay? He offered to pay the rest later, but the druggist refused. No health insurance, nothing like that, no Obamacare, okay? What is Heinz supposed to do? Should he steal the drug and save his wife? Or should he not steal the drug, let his wife die? Obviously, one of those choices is better than the other. But the thing is, Kohlberg was not interested in whether you said yes or no. He was interested in why yes, why no. So from studying people and presenting these dilemmas to children of different age, to young children, teenagers, or even adults, Kohlberg learned that people go through stages of moral development. That children understand morality in one way when they're young, different when they're older. Kohlberg stages of development. Okay, so level 1, 4 to 10 years of age, is called the pre-conventional level. Starts with level 1, starts at age 4. Why does it start at age 4? Why not at birth? Because from 0 to about 4 years of age, children don't know about right and wrong. It doesn't mean anything to them. By about age 4, they start realizing some things are wrong and some things are right. And how do they understand that? 4 to 10, pre-conventional level, morality is based on rewards and punishments. That's how they understand right and wrong. They understand that something is wrong if it gets punished, something is right if it gets rewarded. Or something may be okay if you don't get punished for it. That's what children understand. In other words, they understand physical consequences, okay? This is similar to Piaget's theory, by the way, where younger children understand concrete things, things that are physical, older children more mental things, things that are abstract. So these children understand physical things, concrete things, right? What's punished is wrong, what is rewarded is right. So stage 1 would be that punishment and obedience orientation. Stage 1, they obey rules to avoid punishment. Okay, so a child is asked, should Heinz steal the drug, right? Child might say no. If he steals the drug, he'll go to jail. Okay, that's punishment and obedience orientation. That's level 1. In other words, you don't want to do something because you'll get punished, or you think something is okay because you'll be rewarded. Stage 2, naive instrumental real behaviorism. This is when children obey rules for self-interest. They're vaguely aware of fairness. You know, it's that kind of philosophy, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. So should Heinz steal the drug? An example of a child in this stage might give is, yes, Heinz should steal the drug so his wife will love him, right? He saves her, she's gonna love him back. You know, that kind of thing. But either way, this is concrete stuff. If you get rewarded, it's right. If you get punished, it's wrong. That's what children understand at level 1. So if someone gets punished, someone gets rewarded with a trophy or gets sent to the back of the room, that's, that's what they understand. They understand physical consequences. Second stage, level 2, or I should say it's levels, not stages, okay? Level 2 is 10 to 13 years of age. Now it's called the conventional level of morality. Here, children basically desire approval from individuals in society. The conventional level, what it really has to do with is the approval of others. That is what is guiding children's thinking about right and wrong. So they enter stage 3, that's good boy, nice girl morality. And they begin to judge behavior by intention. So should Heinz steal the drug? Child might say yes, because people will think you're a bad person if you don't save your wife. What matters here is what other people think. In other words, what is right is what other people think. That's the conventional level. Stage 4, law and order mentality. Again, it has to do with what other people think. The law is what people have decided is right? Law and order mentality. Children become concerned with authority and social order, right? Child might say, no, Heinz should not steal the drug one should be a good citizen and obey the law. The law is what people say is right. It's what people have decided is right. And people should obey the law. That's still conventional level. That is basically, you know, them saying something is right because other people say it's right. There is a higher level of morality, and that's level 3. Level 3, 13 years and over, called the post-conventional level. And according to Kohlberg, not all children get this. Not all adults actually are capable of thinking in this way. But this is the highest level of morality, called post-conventional. This is what is true morality. Morality based on internal standards. In other words, it's based on your own beliefs. It's based on your own understanding of what it means, right? Based on your own abstract thinking, right? Morality based on an enlightened conscience. You really understand the subject. You understand. You can think logically about it. Notice how it's similar to Piaget with the use of logic, the use of abstract ideas, right? So stage 5, right? The best values are those based on law because they are accepted by society. Stage 5 is basically, they say, the child says basically, no, Heinz should not steal the drug, right? Heinz should obey the law because laws are made to benefit society. People need to obey the law because we need them. Without the law, we have chaos. Notice it's a philosophical argument. It's not just saying that the law is what people have decided and therefore it's right. It's basically we need laws. Without laws, we have chaos. Right? If everybody decides to just take whatever they want, then we're going to have chaos. We're going to have anarchy. So it's still an enlightened conscience. You're arguing for the law, but at a philosophical level. And that's the important things is, right? You argue for things at a philosophical level. Okay? You could say that Heinz should steal the drug as well because, laws are, yeah, important, but they're not as important as people. Okay? That's also level 3. And that would be stage 6. Stage 6 is when an informed conscience governs morality. People judge what is right and wrong based on internal standards, based on their understanding of the concept, based on their understanding of what fairness means or what justice means, right? What right and wrong really is. Okay, it's philosophical. Should Heinz steal the drug? The person might say, yes, Heinz should steal the drug because human life is more precious than laws, right? Yes, laws are made to protect people, but if they don't protect people, you shouldn't obey that law, right? Human life has more value. It's a philosophical argument. You could argue for or against the legalization of marijuana at this level, at a lower level, whatever it is, But the point is that it's the argument that you make is what determines what level you're at. If your argument is all about, is it good for you, right? Are you going to get punished or rewarded? That's level 1. If your argument is, I'm doing what other people say is right, that's level 2. If your argument is, this is right because of some philosophical argument, right? Because of freedom of speech, or because, which also means freedom of expression, or because of some philosophical argument, that is level 3. And I'll give you an example, right? That has to do with slavery. Someone arguing at level 1 for slavery back in the day would say, when it was legal back in the day would say, well, I have slaves and I want to be able to keep my slaves, right? They make me rich. So I think slavery should be legal. That's level 1. Or someone who says, slavery, should be legal because it's the law. People have voted for it. They say it's okay. That's level 2. But someone who argues at level 3 is likely to think about fairness and justice and is more likely to make the argument that, that we're all human beings. It doesn't matter what color we are, right? That we're all human beings and that no person should be enslaved by another if we really are a true society. That's an argument for level 3. A lot of people argued for slavery and voted for it again and again. It was legal in this country for many years. And there were people back then who said, no, it doesn't matter that most people think it's right. It is still wrong. If you think about fundamentally what it is wrong. Those people were thinking at a higher level. They were thinking at level 3. When most people, by the way, back then were thinking at level 2. They were going along with it because the people in power agreed that it was okay and people went along with that. Even religious leaders were okay with it. The churches were okay with it. I mean, slavery is mentioned in the Bible and in your religious texts. It's in there a lot. That doesn't mean it's right. And other people were arguing for it despite the fact they were going against the majority. Here's the thing about when things are right or wrong, okay? The majority of people aren't always right, okay? Most of us, when we do things because most people agree with that. You dress because other people dress that way, right? You dress a certain way because other people dress that way. You think a certain way because other people think that way. You like certain music because other people like it. You smoke weed because other people smoke weed. You speed because other people speed. Most people function at level 2. That's where we're at most of the time. A lot of us, probably most of us, especially because you guys are in college, are capable of level 3 thinking, when you can decide for yourself based on what morality really means, on what that thing really means. And it's best to function at level 3, where it's no longer about popular opinion. It's no longer about peer pressure. But most of the time, we fall into the category of peer pressure. That's level 2. It's best to be at level 3, but we don't always function at that level. Okay, that is where we will stop. I will stop recording.